Human ingenuity. We've used it to build empires, cure diseases, and literally touch the stars. But there is a shadow side to our brilliance. Sometimes that exact same creative power is harnessed for something far, far more sinister. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the absolute darkest pinnacle of human invention. We're stepping back into an era where a machine was designed not just to end a life, but to turn agonizing death into a twisted, theatrical performance.
So what exactly is the worst punishment in human history? It's a genuinely disturbing question, isn't it? I mean, we can all easily picture the basic, brutal instruments of the past. Claws that rip flesh, heavy cudgels that smash bone, or the swift, sudden drop of a hangman's noose. But what happens when you combine technological brilliance with sheer, unadulterated sadism? Imagine a fate so incredibly slow and so systematically cruel that it makes having your head severed seem profoundly merciful by comparison.
Section 1. An instrument of cruelty, the origins of the beast. To really understand this nightmare, we have to journey back thousands of years. Between 570 and 554 BC, in ancient Greece, this terrifying machine was first conceptualized. Now, you might be thinking, is this just some dark fairy tale? Well, we know it's not. We know because of a monumental ancient work called the Bibliotheca Historica, or the Historical Library. Written by the ancient Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, these surviving texts chronicle world history, and right there within their fragile pages, they document the very real, very nightmarish existence of the Brazen Bull.
Every dark creation requires two things: an architect to design it and a patron to fund it. The architect here was a man named Perlos of Athens. He was an ambitious, highly skilled artisan, basically pitching a dark creation for profit and favor, and he found his patron in Phalaris, the tyrant of Acrocus. Now, Phalaris was a man with a horrifying reputation. Some historical accounts portray him as a ruler who absolutely delighted in torture, with rumors even whispering that he devoured infants. And while historians still debate the true extent of his madness, there's no doubt that it was this ruthless tyrant who eagerly commissioned Perlos's dark vision.
Section 2. Anatomy of the Brazen Bull, engineering agony.
Let's actually look inside the belly of this beast to understand exactly how this machine operated. The design was chillingly methodical. Cast entirely from solid bronze, it was sculpted to the exact life-size dimensions of a real bull. First, a heavy metal door was opened, and the victim was locked inside that pitch-black, hollow chamber. Second, a roaring fire was lit directly beneath the metal belly. Inside, the bronze would slowly, relentlessly heat up. But what made this machine truly horrifying was step 3. As the victim howled in unimaginable pain, their screams were forced through a complex system of specially distorted acoustic pipes built right into the bull's head. Finally, as the victim burned, thick smoke would escape through holes in the bull's nose. And to mask the horrific stench of burning flesh, that nose was packed full of sweet-smelling incense.
The sheer psychological terror of this device is perfectly captured in the promise Perlos made to his wealthy patron. Imagine standing in that ancient court, listening as the inventor proudly states, "The occupant will shriek and roar in unremitting agony, and his cries will come to you through the pipes as the tenderest, most pathetic, most melodious of bellowings." Let that sink in. He had engineered a machine to literally strip away a victim's humanity, twisting their dying screams into a musical performance purely for a tyrant's amusement.
And when the screaming finally stopped, the macabre process wasn't quite finished. After the slow roasting was complete and the fires finally died down, the ashes inside were cleared. According to legend, the victim's remaining charred bones were carefully collected, but they weren't buried. Instead, they were polished and crafted into morbid bracelets. Think about that. A wearable, shining trophy of someone's ultimate suffering.
Section 3. Betrayal of the Creator, a fatal test.
So, Perlos had delivered his masterpiece. He stood before Phalaris, likely expecting riches, elevation, and status, the whole shebang. But what happened next shocked even the inventor himself. You see, despite his own brutal reputation, Phalaris claimed to be absolutely disgusted by the cold, calculated nature of the machine. The tyrant's chilling, hypocritical realization was recorded for history. His words revolted me. I loathed the thought of such ingenious cruelty and resolved to punish the artificer in kind. That's right, the man who commissioned the torture device decided its very first victim should be its creator. Phalaris looked at Perlos and delivered a simple, fatal command. Get inside yourself and pretend to roar. He told him he wanted to see whether the pipes would actually make the music he described. Perillos, eager to prove his genius and completely unaware of the trap closing around him, climbed inside his own creation, and then the heavy, bronze door slammed shut behind him. The timeline of these two men is a masterclass in dark, poetic justice. In 554 BC, Perillos is trapped inside. Now, some historical sources say Phalaris ordered the fire lit immediately, literally letting the inventor roast in his own trap. Others claim the tyrant pulled him out just before he died, only to throw him off a jagged cliff. Either way, Perillos perished for his dark creativity. But the story doesn't end there. Years later, Phalaris' reign of terror collapsed. He was overthrown from power. And for his final act, the cruel tyrant was forced into the glowing bronze belly of the very same machine he had paid for. The commissioner and the creator, both ultimately consumed by their own dark legacy.
Section 4. Echoes in Ancient Rome. The Martyrs. Now, you might think the story of the Brazen Bull ended with the fall of ancient Greece. But an invention this terrifying, it's rarely forgotten. Centuries later, the Romans resurrected the horror to punish early Christians. And this brings us to the tragedy of St. Eustace in the 2nd century AD. Eustace was a former Roman soldier who converted after experiencing a profound divine vision. His life became this grueling test of faith, losing his wealth, his servants, and his family. Though tales say his family was eventually returned to him, their reunion was tragically brief. Condemned by Emperor Hadrian, Eustace, his restored wife, and his children were locked inside the Brazen Bull, together, to be roasted alive.
But as the history of the Brazen Bull intertwines with religious texts, the narrative takes a bizarre shift from sheer horror to the supernatural. A piece of Christian history, translated in the 1800s, describes the aftermath of Eustace's execution with an eerie, almost unsettling serenity. It claims, "The holy martyrs, by divine power, remained alive for 3 days. All 4 were found without life, but also without any injury to their bodies or garments."
And Eustace wasn't alone in this lore. There's also the story of Saint Antipas. Dragged to a glowing red-hot brazen bull, normally used for sacrifices, he was thrown into the devastating heat. Yet according to the texts, he didn't scream through the acoustic pipes. Instead, he prayed loudly, forgave his tormentors from inside the furnace, and departed, quote, as peacefully as if he fell asleep. It's a chilling, surreal contrast, isn't it? The terrifying reality of the glowing copper versus the reported peaceful demise of the martyrs.
Section 5. Separating fact from legend, the surviving echoes. Whenever we examine dark history, we inevitably reach a crossroads where verified horror blurs into centuries of myth-making. So what's real and what's legend? Well, the historical evidence is undeniable. The written records passed down via Diodorus Siculus, those are real. The manuscripts documenting the Brazen Bull, its inventor Perillos, and the tyrant Phalaris, you can still read those today. But the mythological elements, martyrs surviving unscathed for days in a raging fire, or experiencing completely painless deaths, those are heavily disputed by historians. It's even entirely possible that the absolute depths of Phalaris' cruelty were exaggerated by his enemies over the centuries. Today, you can find depictions of the bull in museums, but they're only replicas. The original beast is completely lost to time.
The exact historical truth of every scream may remain shrouded in mystery, but the legend of the Brazen Bull absolutely endures. It stands as a dark monument to human psychology. It forces us to look back at our ancestors and ask a deeply, deeply unsettling question. When we possess the brilliant capability to invent, to engineer, and to create, why is it that some of our greatest efforts are dedicated not to improving civilization, but simply to making suffering unforgettable? Something to think about the next time you marvel at a new human invention.